I don't know what happened, it went off, and for some reason the sound was bad. It was bad last week, or last Tuesday too. And I don't know what's going on the YouTube. I'm doing everything exactly the same, do the same procedure. And so, I'm on right now. If I do sound bad, please let me know and I'll change my mic, but the mic worked great before. I appear to be on, I better not hit any buttons. Yeah, Chrome just went off and I couldn't reboot it. I had to reboot my whole computer before fourth period. I know you feel my pain. I whispered some colorful metaphors and then moved on. All of them. You ever see how fast I can run? Just aerodynamic. Finally, I let it grow. It was getting very long. This summer I was 5 months without a haircut. That was a long time. I've been in college. College, yeah, I'll be good. No. Shoulder width, I hated every second of it. That looked so bad. But, so I went and then I decided to cut it off, and so, yeah, we did it. Tomorrow there's a quiz on chapter 12. And there's going to be 10, and I'm doing the same thing I did before in the last couple quizzes, just kind of like mini matching, so I just give you the choices, 10 questions, and then 1 or 2 short answers. So there'll be a little bit of writing, but not much. And I have not decided 1 or 2. But for sure at least 1. And your choices for that will be, for the short IDs, so you have to know more, will be called the domesticity or the second grade awakening. So it might be both of them, it might just be one of them. Sound good? And I'm letting you know, I want everyone to do very well on this quiz. My point is just for you to review it and go through it and give you a little points on that. Obviously, my chapter is significantly harder, and that's fine. And remember short IDs, 3 to 4 sentences, explain what, where, when, give you some basic information. Be concise though. Give an example, and then why it's important, what it led to. So that's it. It'll be, I'll put it on Teams tomorrow. It'll drop like at 8 hours. And sound good? You excited? Just on chapter 12. The reason why I'm doing that is all these things are going to be over the first 50 years of the 19th century because of the Industrial Revolution. So when I talk about the Industrial Revolution, I can mention these and talk about them. You already know what they are. In chapters, sometimes we do it by themes and do all the reform movements, even though they're not quite all reforms, and they'll put them all in one chapter. I don't like that because it's all interrelated with the Industrial Revolution. So that's what we're doing tomorrow, and we'll have class and all that. And so, didn't we got, I showed you the crab-based history. There's a whole book of crab-based history. I guess it's all the Chester the Crab history of the United States. I tried to get it for your textbook, they wouldn't let me. It is kind of funny when it says, America is finally strong enough without me. Okay, so. Where does it say in the Constitution that you have freedom of speech? Yeah, it doesn't quite say that. It says it can't be taken away. It's a gray area, but it's still a big distinction. And where in the Constitution, by the way, people are watching, please write down, please just send me a message if the sound is okay. We're a few seconds behind. It's like about a 5 or 6 second delay. So I said it again, probably they were typing like, we got it. Okay, so what amendment said that even though there are rights that aren't listed in the Constitution, the people have them? Yeah, that's the 9th. Where does it say that there are powers that don't directly go to the federal government, go to the states? That's 10. But remember that necessary and proper clause makes that a big, huge gray area. That implied powers are also called a loose interpretation of the Constitution. There's all kinds of metaphors for it. So we did the bank. We did the bus yesterday, right? Yeah. And that would be the example of the first, not only bank, but what kind of business in the United States. Yeah, even though it's not technically a corporation yet. corporations as we know it would come about in Belgium, of course, in 1830. And so we went through all this with a charter, loan money, issue currency. That's the biggie. They can control the money supply. And they want to create this financial market. So we went through all that. Let's get to the protective tariff then. Let's see if anybody... We can hear fine. All right, so no idea what I did. It could be the program. It's got to go through a production program to go into YouTube. And it could be that. Maybe I got to upgrade it, but I can't do it on the computer. So protective tariff. Now, protective tariff is a high tax. Remember, that's a high tax on exports. That's imports. A tax on imports. And in the report on manufacturers that Hamilton wrote, what he wanted. So this one I did not put down, so you have to summarize it yourself. What Hamilton wanted was a high tariff to encourage domestic production. Encourage a domestic production. There was no domestic production on really the only product that came out of the Industrial Revolution yet, textiles. A tariff would raise the price. If the price would go up, that would encourage local industry in the United States to form, because there was no textile industry in the U.S. yet. And that's why it's called protecting. It protects, in this context, American business from foreign competition. Now, there's a problem with this, and everyone knows it. If there's a protective tariff, all prices go up, because you're raising the price of foreign imports. New manufacturing starts, well, it's always the most expensive to produce goods at the beginning. And so this raises all prices. And so, most people are farmers. That means they'll pay higher prices. And this one, Washington did not support. Remember, Washington supported the bank. He didn't support this. And without Washington's support, this did not pass. A very small tariff that we give the generic name revenue tariff would pass. What's a revenue tariff? Just enough to collect money for the government, but not enough to protect American industry. The tariff argument will be widely debated all the way up till, well, actually today, but the big era would be till the 1960s. And this is it's a British, Chinese porcelain was huge in the growing industrial Britain at that time, and so this is about, they traded through Britain and they put success to trade. By the way, so much of this porcelain would go through from China. That's where you get the term China, because it was such a big deal. That was like if you made it. If you had money, you bought Chinese porcelain. Porcelain from China in the 18th century. China. So with that, number 4, war. This was bitterly divided. The French Revolution started in 1789, but to the war raged across Europe. But to the American point of view, it was the Anglo-French. Anglo means British. This was the war that mattered the most to them, and the U.S. was caught right in the middle. Hamilton, even though he fought against the British, was wounded against the British, he was a war hero. He admired the British system, especially the economic system in the Bank of Britain, and to a lesser degree the government. He wanted a monarchy. Jefferson, he saw the French Revolution as his revolution. I started this with my Declaration of Independence. In fact, he was still in France when the beginning was just happening. Officially, it started in 1789, when they stormed this castle in Paris, which was being used as a prison called the Bastille. Now it's Bastille Day, which is kind of like the 4th of July in France. They took it down brick by brick, so it's no longer there. There's Bastille Square, where the castle was, but now it is just the outline of the castle in this big square. And it was there. I've been the first time I was in Paris. I stayed near Bastille Square. And that is when my wife and I, jet lag, we're sitting in this little cafe at night, eating, soaking in Paris. It was really cool. And then all of a sudden, and I swear to you I'm not making up, there's all this noise and cheers, and we looked up, And there's all these people on roller skates coming by, waving like at sparklers and lights. And there were hundreds of Parisians, all in roller skates, bare naked, going by. And that was my first little instance of France. Yeah, it was an interesting place. Crepes, amazing. Okay, moving on. Well, 2 years later, for various reasons, they beheaded their king. By the way, what instrument of torture, or what instrument of execution did he use? That would be so humane. Yeah, the guillotine. It would be so humane, they would never have to, or they would not have to worry about torturing somebody to death. It's not. Well, we don't know. Anybody know when the last guillotine execution was? Please. Huh? Good answer. That's always the same answer. Yeah, 1974.
Yeah, it wasn't that pretty small.
Yeah, France. In France, yeah, and actually they were wondering if maybe when the head came off so cleanly, maybe the head was still alive. And a French biologist actually talked to the guy who's being executed and said, "Say something to me after your head's come off."
Is this the same guy who's like living many times in Japan?
Yeah. Said sit, talk, or blink, yeah. And needless to say, I don't think, even if your head's still alive, you're probably not thinking very clearly. Moving on. Well, once you kill the king, you can imagine what's going to happen. Everybody in Europe attacked. Everybody attacked France. And it became a worldwide war. That's part of the reason why they devolved to the terror. And so with this, the U.S. is involved. Who's involved? Merchant ships. U.S. merchant ship owners are trading with Europe. And they're being caught in what we generically, almost forgot somebody. Citizen Genet was a French citizen. By the way, they got rid of titles of nobility, thus everybody was equal, aka citizen. When the Soviet Union was created, well, it wasn't quite the Soviet Union, yeah, but when it first started, they had the same idea, everyone's equal, and they called everyone comrade, copying the French Revolution. Citizen Genet was what? Well, he's an alien in the terms that became from outer space. And with that, the alien influence, alien means he's not a citizen. That's all alien means. So most people from outer space are not citizens yet. But he would be dubbed a dangerous alien by the government because he came to the United States to encourage the United States to get involved in the French Revolution. Why? Because the French helped the U.S. win. Remember after the Battle of Saratoga? They helped the United States win. The assumption was the U.S. would help. No. The Washington administration was terrified of the French Revolution. And then on the high seas, a commercial war began. A commercial war. Where U.S. merchant ships were caught right in the middle of it. Right in the middle of this commercial war. What was the war? Oh, and the U.S. would declare neutrality. The U.S. would declare neutrality, well, Washington did. Here is his proclamation of neutrality. The U.S. would not get involved with either side. Because what was the problem? Well, the powerful British fleet was able to blockade France. And so they were stopping U.S. merchant ships who were trying to trade with France. And with that, we'll talk more about that because this will become the reason the U.S., one of the reasons, the U.S. would get involved in the War of 1812. We'll start the War of 1812. French pirates, known as corsairs, were trying to do the same thing to Britain. They were stopping ships going to Britain. That included U.S. merchant ships and taking their prize. Working for the government, that's a privateer. The British did the same thing against the Spanish, but now the British were furious about this. Well, that's how U.S. merchant ships are stopped. Washington knew he could not get involved in a war with this country that's barely surviving. He wanted nothing to do with this. So this, yeah.
What did the corsairs do?
Pirates. And so they were privateers. They were stopping U.S. ships, or any ships going into Britain, and that included U.S.-owned ships. I'm trying to exaggerate that U.S.-owned. These are not like American ships owned by the U.S. government. These are merchant vessels owned by merchants, proto-capitalism, early capitalism. So, with other issues were going on. And the United States and Britain would negotiate a treaty called Jay's Treaty during the middle of this. Yeah.
Wait, so what happened with the British blockade?
The British blockade was stopping the American-owned ships from going into France.
Oh,
And I'll tell you more about the blockade because that will be one of the causes of the War of 1812. Because this war is going to go on basically from 1790 to 1815. And then Europe's going to, for the most part, avoid major wars. For the most part. So kind of a big one that's coming up 100 years after that. Armageddon, aka World War I. It's coming. But, Jay's Treaty. Now, it was so new negotiating treaty, Washington sent the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which actually makes no sense, but he did. I couldn't imagine John Roberts doing this now, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court now. It would make no sense. But it was unclear then. The treaty, we're not going to go into details, but it was pro-British. One of the big issues was not just the blockade, but the British had never really left forts here. And remember the Treaty of Paris said this is American territory. And so with that, supporters of Jefferson, more and more calling themselves Republicans, would burn Jay's body in effigy, saying he is a traitor to the United States. And if Jay is a traitor, remember, Jay negotiated this for the Washington administration. That means Jefferson's calling whom a traitor? Boy, it took no time at all for the father of the country to become a traitor by the opposing party. And then, of course, Washington supporters called Jefferson a dangerous radical, wants to bring the French Revolution to the U.S. And so this was about as controversial as you could get. And these would be the big issues that would lead to the first political parties. Here's a cartoon, and yes, it's creepy, but here is the reconciliation between Britannia and her daughter America. And it's an anti-Washington cartoon. See Washington? And he has a tail, or the fox. He's sneaky like a fox. See that? Here's Britain, and that is America. Remember I told you how American Indians represented liberty? And that's how it would be drawn a lot. Lady Columbia as an American Indian. After the War of 1812 and the Battle of Tippecanoe, we'll get to that, that would change. But implying that Washington's secret plan was to have a revolutionary war to break away from Britain so we could go back and become part of Britain again. Things got a little crazy. If you think it's divisive now, just imagine calling George Washington a traitor, or for that matter, Thomas Jefferson. And so, out of this would be the beginning of Hamiltonian economics. And Hamiltonian economics, we talked about this with the vague ideas of, because he admired the British, the tariff, the bank, and the assumption bill. All of these have goals in this report on manufacturing, report on credit. And it was basically this. This merchant class creates wealth. If you want the country to prosper, you need wealth. Who creates it the fastest? And that was his goal, or that was his idea. And so he really had amazing foresight. Just from reading bits about the Industrial Revolution that was just beginning, he could begin to foresee how wealth would be created. Now, it's more complex than this, and he'd be wrong about things, but Hamilton was a brilliant man. And therefore, government policy should be geared to help this new financial elite. Because we have to have finance to accumulate the money to buy the machines. The machines are what we call capital. Now, the machines are literally just being invented at this time. So he's talking about something that has not happened in the U.S. yet. And therefore, there must be direct government aid to what we would say today, business. That wouldn't have quite made sense yet. Direct government aid. Help them. That's things like the bank. That's things like the assumption bill. That's things like the tariff. Government policy. And then use that money to build roads and canals, which are necessary for business to get your goods to market and raw materials to the brand new factories. And, like I said, they would take this money and they would build manufacturing. I mean manufacturing generically, manufacturing, the whole infrastructure for manufacturing, and the finance. Finance is the we think of finance as the banking industry, but it's more than that. It's the way to accumulate the money to purchase the machine. Yes.
So they would give money to businesses, and then how would they get the money back to the businesses? Would it just be taxes?
Yeah, through taxes. And the idea with the country would prosper with that, through taxes, etc. And then here's the thing. He's foreseeing a world where there's going to be a few individuals owning the machines. By the way, he wants something like monopolies. He wants monopolies. But to protect it, we need a standing military. We need a military to collect the taxes, the Whiskey Rebellion, remember that? And to make sure that people want to invest in the United States, they know their industry, their investment will be protected by a standing military. And so he talked about almost a marriage between a financial and military elite, which terrified people like Madison. And then low wages. Remember the Assumption Bill to make farmers, drive small farmers out of business so they become the low-wage workers. Why low wages? Low wages make sure there is more money left over for the production of goods. So therefore there could be more manufacturing. Or for that matter, they could also build mansions with their money. But Hamilton's assumption was they will act rationally and build factories. And this, you'll see this would eventually, Hamiltonian economics would become the roots of Whiggery, which would be Whig economics. I know you're waiting for Whiggery, right? Which after Civil War would be called laissez-faire economics. And then laissez-faire economics would become trickle-down economics. And then trickle-down economics got a bad connotation because of the Great Depression. And so by the 1970s, this will be called supply-side economics. And so this is the roots of, they're very close, but this is the roots of conservative economics. Could you look at conservative economics? We've been basically conservative since 1980 economically. And the goal is to put more money in the hands of people who would produce the goods, AKA these people. And so these are the roots of conservative. Now, you're going to see, we'll get to more liberal economics, but I have to add one thing. They're very close. They're really close to each other. Because these are different versions of a national economic policy dealing with a market economy. By the way, this is kind of close to mercantilism, but mercantilism is much more government control. That was Hamilton's idea. And he's going to be, so for example, at the time of the strongest liberal economics, he'll be a hero or a villain to some people and a hero to others, like in the 1930s. It's interesting history. So with that, Washington, after years of rancor, being called a traitor by his own Secretary of State, he is going to set a precedent by giving a farewell address. Here's the handwritten farewell address. Now this was just simply put out in newspapers and pamphlets. This was not done as a speech. Now it's done by a speech. It's a big event. Most farewell addresses are just kind of pablum, but they're not that big of a deal. There are two farewell addresses we will have to know in class. This one, and then Dwight Eisenhower's in 1961. I bet you weren't expecting Eisenhower, but Dwight Eisenhower. Those are the two ones that have the greatest impact, or at least the most accurate predictions. But his element, and I'll explain this in just a second, was first off, avoid foreign entanglements. Wars divide the country, lead to standing armies, lead to tyranny, lead to secret government, lead to secret police. Hey, you gotta have secret police to root out potential enemies. Avoid foreign entanglements, avoid war. He's talking about that Anglo-French War. He was terrified that a president who might not have the stature of Roosevelt, did I say Roosevelt, as of Washington, could get in that war. Next, because of that bitter partisan divide, I should have put these up, but avoid political parties. Avoid political parties. Washington still had that idea that can't we just have a like-minded people come together and do what's best for the country? But it doesn't work that way. You could have very smart people who want what's only best for the country, to their point of view, close to what we would call patriots, and totally disagree on what direction the country's going to go. Totally disagree. And if they totally disagree, then there has to be some forum for the people to decide which one they think is the best system. We're coming to something more like democracy. But Washington was still hoping. Here's a pro-Washington anti-political parties, and it's the Jeffersonians and the Federalists tearing the country apart. Pulling it apart, and it says liberty and independence here. The political cartoons are really hard to follow. You can never read what they say. And here's Washington, this creepy thing right here is Washington. And this is supposed to be clouds warning the people not to do this, his farewell address. And by the way, did you know this was clouds? That's what I thought. Why is he throwing rocks at him? Why is he in this edifice of rocks? But that's the warning here. So, what we're going to come out of this are two political parties. The factions that Madison said would never happen. And you have the Federalists on one side, much around, or coalescing around the ideas of Alexander Hamilton. That's a statue in front of the old Treasury building right by the White House. So the White House, if you're looking at the front of the White House, it's just right over here. Here is at the Jefferson Memorial. So across the tidal basin, if you stand, actually at the White House, there's a cut line through the trees around the tidal basin, so you can look at the Jefferson Memorial from the White House. It was built during Franklin Roosevelt's administration, and he wanted to see it, so he had him cut down the tree so he could look at it out the Oval Office window. Pre-Oval Office, but his office window. So at that, here are the parties. So the Federalists, Hamilton, and another person we'll put down there is Adams. Even though technically he never joined it, he was sympathetic. By the way, like virtually everybody else in the country, Adams hated Hamilton. Hamilton did not have many friends. I think he was kind of a jerk who always tried to seduce his friends' wives. But not only that, he was so smart that he was always manipulating. So, Republicans, Jefferson, and Madison. And we'll go through the different points of view of each one. And ones we've already kind of talked about, but this will start to coalesce and make sense. The first one, the Federalists were in the Northeast, and these were the merchant class. And where were the most cities in the United States? In the Northeast. Boston, New York, and Philadelphia were the three biggest cities and commercial centers in the country. The Republicans, the South, and the brand new West. What was the West at this time? The Wild West, Kentucky and Tennessee. That's the Wild West. I guess Memphis was, and Nashville, which is crazy. Duels in the streets, just lawless. So. Oh, good. Thank you for saying that. So Jefferson, more and more, and ironically Madison, who was at first opposed to this, wanted more voice for the common man. But Jefferson, their point of view would be that the elites, or they would, for example, pick elites to speak for them. They were elites speaking for the common man. And so this wasn't quite the party of the common man. By the way, when I say common man, I do not mean like average. Common means they weren't born of noble or aristocratic birth. They weren't born rich. The idea is that everybody would be equal. This real idea of a common man, where also the common man would rule, would come about with Andrew Jackson. Next, urban, industry, and the money that goes with it. By the way, the building of factories, not near as profitable as the financial tinkerings around it to make money. That's what the real money's in. That's the big money. And therefore they want a tariff. Rural, agricultural, no tariff. Tariffs raise prices. Next, the Federalists said they want a strong central government and therefore implied powers with a loose interpretation of the Constitution. The Republicans, well, they don't want a stronger central government, so that means by definition, stronger states. Stronger states. And therefore, the implied powers have got to be limited. But you notice the asterisks. You see the asterisks? That's what Jefferson and Madison say when the Federalists are in power. But what do you suppose is going to happen when Jefferson becomes president and Republicans control Congress? Then they want the stronger government. Then they want a loose interpretation of the Constitution. And you'll see this all the time. Whoever's in power wants more power for the government. And their opposition wants less power, and then don't reverse. Trust me, you will see this if Vice President Biden wins in 2 weeks, and we go through election week, who knows how long. We might know the winner that evening, and we might not know for 2 weeks. That would be fun. But if Biden wins, I guarantee you all of a sudden Democrats who were saying that the Trump administration was using too much power will all of a sudden reverse. And those who are supporting the Trump administration and their use of government power, they will reverse. It will happen. Guarantee it. Next, Britain and France we talked about. Next, the Federalists feared the democracy. They wanted aristocratic rule, paternalism. The Republicans, they don't want full democracy, they want more democratic. They want more of a vote. Of course, the vote will pick elites. Jefferson more and more is saying we should have most white men vote. A tiny step, but still a step. Oh, that's the first executive mansion in Washington, D.C. that would be completed in 1800 and then burned down in 1814. So those are the first two political parties. And there is no direct line between the current parties. It's much more divided, it's like a rope and mixes in. But generally, they're more conservative. Generally, they're more liberal. But they have definite conservative elements. If they're Southerners, and they talk about they want free speech and freedom and more voice of the people, classical liberalism, they're also slave holders. And here, the same deal. We want more a rule by an elite, but we also want free people. So, like I said, the parties, you have more more liberal or conservative, we'll see the same things economically. It doesn't mean they're consistent. What matters are what the two parties think in the terms of who they're trying to benefit. It's better to look at that than philosophy, because philosophy, I'm not kidding, will switch all over. All over. So, sorry about this. The election of 1796. And this will be the first contested presidential election. I should add in, I did not type it in because I guess I got tired. But who is this? Majorly looking. Who is it? The Vice President, John Adams of Massachusetts. He will be the Federalist, even though he technically would never say he's a Federalist. Washington never joined the Federalist Party. Washington was one of two presidents that's going to be no party in American history. Adams, Federalist. Even though he technically never joined. He's going to run against the Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson. He's the Republican, and Jefferson was a Republican. He was a Republican. And a couple little quirks of the old Constitution that are gone now by amendment. Every elector, remember the Electoral College? And how many electors does Montana have? There's a shot, slight, that we might get one more member of the Congress, but that means 4 electors. In 2024, your first election you'll be able to vote in, right? Is what, you mostly 16 or 17, right? In my special topics class in Western Civ, most are seniors. And so they all have special topics. And it's like 50-50 who's going to vote. It's kind of cool vote. I already voted. Isn't that cool? Doing my, it's actually like a job, you have to vote. Yeah.
Totally random. How many forms of ID do you
74.
vote?
In the United States, or in the United States, every state has different rules. Every state, some require a lot of ID, some don't. In Montana, they send you a voter information slip where it has your vote, your precinct, where you vote at, and you have to have that. And then you sign in, and they have, when you first register, they make a copy and have your signature on it. So you have to have that and your signature. If you don't have that card, then you have to have like a driver's license or passport or social security card. There's a list of them, but the big thing, if you have that thing, so I like going to vote in person, but they try to tell me not to. I think why? But yeah, you turn that in and you sign. The big thing is when you sign, don't be too unique on your signature. I think everyone's kind of like that. Yeah. And so don't have somebody with bad eyes look at it and say, not you. Some states, I mean, they require a lot of ID. So this makes it a little more difficult to vote. Montana's actually, they make it a little bit easier. There's arguments for each. For mail-in ballots, which are generally very secure, but they do the signature thing and a few other things. And so with that, every elector has 2 votes. So they vote twice. And then they count the total votes. The winner is president. Second place is what? Vice president. You see a problem there? They didn't expect political parties, or at least didn't expect it to happen this way. They would change the Constitution in 1801. They vote once for president, once for vice president. That's what they do now. But since they're like in Montana, they're either going to be Trump or Biden elector, they will vote for Biden Harris or Trump Pence. And so with that, and this, they knew all of a sudden we might have a weird situation where you have the winner be of one party and the second place be of another. And they tried to come up with a way around this, but it never really worked. And this election was bitter. Here you have the Adams supporters, Federalists, accusing Jefferson of stopping the expansion of the United States. Here is Washington, and this is supposed to be Washington and the country advancing forward. And there's Jefferson trying to hold the wheels back. This revolutionary, AKA traitor. Jefferson. Here is a Republican banner saying, turn out and save your country from ruin. Down with the Tories, down with the British faction. Vote for Jefferson. Meaning they're calling Adams a traitor. Think about that for a second. They're calling each other traitors. These were friends and co-authors of the Declaration of Independence, and now they're calling each other traitors. Needless to say, political discourse was brand new. And the crisis came about with this. When the electors were counted, there was no popular vote then. State assemblies chose the electors. Adams won 71-68. Close election. But then their second vote, they split between all these other potential vice presidents. So you have the Federalist, Adams, and the Republican Jefferson as vice president. The leader of the opposition was the vice president. That would be like in 2016, Trump winning and the vice president being Hillary Clinton. And they're political enemies. And these two came to hate each other. I think that happens a lot. We have two people that thought they were friends, and it doesn't just become a casual, like we don't like each other. It becomes, oh, we just hate each other. Despise. They would have become friends again near the end of their life, but certainly not here. And almost immediately the war brewed up in France. Almost immediately. The U.S., and what became known as the XYZ Affair, once Adams became president, the U.S. sent diplomats to try to negotiate a treaty like Jay's Treaty with France. The French, specifically 3 French members of their foreign ministry, dubbed X, Y, and Z, demanded a loan for the Americans to see the French foreign minister. Yes, his name was Talleyrand. A loan is another way of saying a bribe. The United States was furious, absolutely furious that they would demand a bribe, and they went home absolutely convinced that the U.S. has no choice but to go to war. So this cartoon, that's America, makes sense? Lady Columbia with the feathers, and then these are the French looting through American money, American tax revenues to get this bribe. Adams, realizing something has to be done without a declaration of war, ordered his non-existent navy to fight the French in what became known as the Quasi-War. Quasi means partial. And this was a naval war against French corsairs. Perfect place to quit. So what's tomorrow? What's the quiz on? Top 12. 10. 1 or 2 short IDs. Notice what? You'll drop about 8. Everyone have the bookmark? The bookmark is also online. I got the bookmark. The list of terms from the chapter. It's online. What are the 2 choices for the short IDs?
Hamilton Economics and Second Grade.
Not Hamilton, cult.
Cold.
Cult of domesticity.
Yep, that one.
And the second grade away. Yeah, I know it seems a little bit out of order, but this way I can just kind of go back and talk about everything. Which, we never did ask about the video in the short IDs. I told the class many times that you have a chance to get some points back on the test if you read the short IDs.
Did I have a chance to?
Yeah, I said everyone in our class.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I-
I must not have been listening.
You gotta listen!
Yeah,
But you missed a chance on points, and I was wondering why you didn't do it.
I didn't realize I did. Alright.
I'll give you a chance to get a few of those points.
Okay.
Because I think everything threw at you really fast, and I watched you while you were taking it.
Okay.
It happens.
Yeah.
So if you send me a note on Teams, I'll let you know. You have to send me,
Yes.
okay?
I'll do
Just
it
on
tonight.
check, okay. See ya.
I got work today.
Yeah, boy!
I got work today from 4 to 9:30, bro.